So I have been talking about a multitude of things that are going on in this country. And this country is in a major cluster F of major proportions. We have several crises that are going on at one time. So we have the silver tsunami is coming, where boomers are retiring and they're facing housing shortages. We have the nursing shortage, where millions of nurses are retiring or about to just leave the profession altogether. We have a shortage of nursing homes. And on top of that, we have the crisis in the economy. We have, major inflation. We have cost of living, and we have wages that are not keeping up with the cost of living. Now, on top of that, childcare is something that I have been talking about. I mean, weaving that throughout my conversations. Now, how are people that are like young adults, like 30s and 40s, supposed to help out their boomers or older Gen X family members when they are struggling to find childcare and or childcare prices are exorbitant if they are able to find them? If you just Google childcare crisis, many different things pop up because this is a crisis that is going on throughout the country. So just Google childcare crisis. Several pages of things from this year speaking on the childcare crisis. More on the childcare crisis. One more page on the childcare crisis, and there are more, but these are just the first screenshots that I wanted to pull out. So I decided to pull out this Forbes magazine. U.S. childcare crisis is holding back the workforce, typically the moms, and this is being seen. Single and child-free women are seeing how the struggle for childcare is placing women in a bind. Let's talk about this article. Shipping company UPS announced recently that it would expand its on-site childcare initiative to many more of its workers. The company first provided emergency daycare services during a pilot program last year, offering the benefit to employees working the evening shift at its facility in Northern California. The need is so evident that the UPS will offer the initiative to even more workers at the California site as well as select sites in Pennsylvania, and plans to expand the service to additional facilities next year. This is a move that other employers and policymakers should pay attention to. The federal government is investing billions of dollars in emerging sectors like clean energy and semiconductor industry, creating millions of new and quality jobs in the process. But inadequate access to childcare will create significant barriers for any parent or caretaker who hopes to participate in the workforce or access training that can advance their careers. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, as many as 100,000 Americans have been forced to stay home from work each month because of childcare problems. The economic toll now amounts to 122 billion each year in lost earnings, productivity, and revenue. A recent report from the Government Accountability Office found that childcare obligations represent a massive hurdle for workers struggling to access job training. While the pandemic amplified childcare challenges in the United States, this is not a new problem. When my oldest daughter was born nearly 2 decades ago, I was working at the U.S. Department of Labor. I remember worrying at the time about how I would manage to balance my career with caring for my young family. Thankfully, the Labor Department had an on-site childcare center. After relocating to Boston to join the Jobs for the Future, my husband decided to become a stay-at-home father, a job he has now held for 16 years. My career would not have been possible without his willingness and our economic ability to embrace this model. Most families are not so fortunate. Even before the pandemic, more than 2 million parents each year were left with little choice but to reduce their role in the labor force. And those challenges are exacerbated for Black and multiracial parents. They experience job disruptions related to childcare problems at nearly double the rate of white parents. Policymakers at the federal and state levels are taking note. In March, for example, the U.S. Department of Commerce announced that any companies applying for the billions of dollars in funding made available by CHIPS and Science Act will be required to provide childcare for all of their workers. And last week, in response to the expiration of the COVID-19 childcare stabilization funds in September, the White House asked Congress for $16 billion to help temporarily avert a funding cliff that could impact millions of families. With partisan fighting derailing congressional attempts to better fund our childcare system, however, it's clear we cannot rely on federal investment. While it's crucial that we continue to make the case to federal policymakers that childcare is essential to a thriving and equitable economy, we must also work to create public and private solutions. States have an important role to play in addressing the crisis. They can invest in cultivating more childcare providers, devoting resources not only to traditional centers, but also to new approaches that could bring childcare to neighborhoods where services are most lacking. Consider, for instance, the recent partnership between the Mississippi Department of Human Services and childcare management platform Wonder School. The program will recruit educators and help them launch new home-based childcare programs with a particular focus on areas where there are not enough existing providers. Nearly half of all people in the state currently live in a childcare desert. Businesses, meanwhile, can invest in business benefits that directly support the childcare needs of their employees. A growing number of companies now provide their workers with annual childcare stipends, while others are creating on-site childcare services. The programs are paying off. During the recent pilot program of the new daycare service offered by UPS, about 80% of eligible frontline workers took advantage of the benefit. As a result, the company avoided more than 120 unplanned absences and saw a remarkable drop in employee turnover from 31% to 4%. The country is at an inflection point. For decades, we have undervalued and underinvested in our child care system, and now our economy and our most vulnerable workers are paying the price. It will take the combined efforts of the federal government, state leaders, and businesses to ensure every family has access to affordable, high quality childcare that can move forward the country and the economy forward. Now, I wanted to talk about that because we are certainly at an inflection point. We're at an inflection point where we're seeing the decline in birth rate because it has to, while also seeing one side of the aisle who is like, all the unborn babies, they have to be born. But also, we're seeing there's no social safety net, there's no money. You also have that same pro life party or anti choice party that's just like, nope, nope, no benefits, unless you can work. But you have to think about how can you work? How can you work if the childcare costs are exorbitant? Or how can you work if the childcare options are not available because you're in a childcare desert? So it's like when they put the restrictions on parents where you have to work in order to get these benefits, how do you do that when there's no childcare? What do you do when you have to work and your child gets sick or you get sick? What do you do with the children? And so there's not enough conversation and game planning on how like adults with young kids are supposed to take care of these kids. And like I said at the very beginning, this is all coming as the boomers are aging out. They're not working as much. So that means that there's going to be tons of opportunities for people to work. There's going to be tons of opportunities, but who's going to work if childcare is non-existent or too expensive if it is existent? So that's just conversations that we're going to have. And like we've been talking about, nursing is in a cluster F. Um, the education is in a cluster F. We have so many different crises going on in this country, and they're all coming to a head at once. And our country is in trouble. Is in trouble. You guys go ahead, weigh in with your thoughts on this. I did come across a video of this woman who's talking about what she saw. I'm going to put it below, but she's talking about her daycare just sent out new prices. So if you're on my TikTok page, I'm going to put it below. You just click it. If you're on my YouTube page, I'm rolling that next. Don't forget to like, comment, and share.
These daycare prices are getting out of control. Our daycare just sent us the 2024 rates. Preschooler, $382 a week. Infant, $471 a week. These are weekly prices. I mean, look at these 2-day, 3-day prices as well. These were the 2023 prices. Infant, $449 a week. Preschool, $364 a week. 2022 rates. Infant, $413 a week. Preschool, $335 a week. 2021 rates. Infant, $382 a week. Preschool, $310 a week. Now let's take a sec to compare. 2021 infant was $382 a week. And now the infant rate, $471 a week. That's almost a $100 increase from 2024 compared to 2021. I have a preschooler and an infant. Now, luckily, my infant won't start daycare until March, but that's going to be $382 plus $471 a week. Oh, wait, the one that's the cheaper of the two, you get 10% off. So let me take that back. $382 minus 10% plus $471. Let me do that math real quick. $814.80 a week. I mean, how are people doing this? I am a resident doctor, and having to pay this is a lot. And luckily, I make more than the typical resident because I'm active duty military, because it's ridiculous. I mean, how are you guys doing this? How are people doing this? Is this the daycare prices in other big cities? I mean, this is how it is here in Minneapolis and the Twin Cities, but is this how it is everywhere else?